Welcome to Rooted in Light. I'm your host, Tuesday Rivera. Today, I am doing a solo podcast. So, as we determine what this podcast will be, I'm trying out a number of different things. So, sometimes I have people that I interview on. Sometimes, so far, I have folks that I'm in conversation with. And this will be my second solo podcast. So, we're just going to give this a shot today and see what we think. And I'm really giving myself a lot of permission in this podcast to not decide too quickly what it is going to be. I'm looking for feedback from people who are listening, and I'm getting it. The last solo podcast was pretty popular. So, I decided to do another one. So I'm just kind of waiting for feedback, waiting to see what feels good. That is the through line of this podcast. I will talk about my work as a coach, as a guide, as a facilitator. We'll talk about all things goddess. We'll talk about the Akashic records. We'll talk about other ways of knowing. And we will find our feet. And in fact, I think we are finding our feet. I'm excited to do this solo podcast today. And as I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about, really, that's the amazing thing about a podcast, right? I have a set list. My admin Jen and I have talked all of this through, right? We've said what every podcast will be about for the next 12, but it's also available for me just to decide I want to talk about what's on my mind. And so that is what we're going to do today. I have recently had a number of experiences in nature that I want to talk a little bit about and what I'm learning. So this podcast, I'm going to talk a little bit about those experiences and my evolving relationship with the natural world. And I hope that's useful to those of you who have an existing strong relationship to the natural world, but also maybe for those of you who are thinking you'd like to develop a relationship with the natural world, or you hear people talk about going out into nature or talking to trees, or they heard something from the moon, or whatever ways people might talk about it. I know for me, that has felt a little far away, and so in the last little bit of time, I've really, well, that's not true. It's been lifelong in and out, but recently I've been more intentional about what it could look like for me to move into more relationship with nature, to have um, uh, not just relationship, but maybe even co-creation with the natural world. And what does that mean? And how would one go about it? So I'm going to spend the first part of this talking a little bit about some of the experiences I've had recently, as maybe a kind of a on ramp in, and then the principles I'm learning just from my own time. So I hope that that's helpful. I'll share some principles that have been useful to me, and then I'm going to talk about my most recent experience that I had with the Animas Valley Institute. I'm going to talk a little bit about an immersion I went to through them. And a lesson I learned, because it's actually a pretty radical lesson. And it kind of flies in the face of some of what I've been thinking and teaching and learning about. It's not exactly in conflict, but it feels enough different that I feel like I want to share that. So, talk a little bit about my own experience. I'll share some of the principles that I'm learning. And then I'll talk about this lesson that I'm just starting to learn and just starting to integrate and feel out what it really means to me. So I hope you'll join, come along for this solo podcast. It's good to be with you. It's good to have you. It's been really great to get feedback on this podcast from folks. I really appreciate people listening. Um, and yeah, please keep them coming. Keep the emails coming. Tell me about it. It's been really fun to meet people out in different situations where they're like, oh, I listened to that podcast. And so I love it. I love it. Please keep telling me what works for you and what you want to hear more about. And I'll do my best to keep doing that. So I want to talk a little bit about this call to move more closely into relationship with nature that's really been alive for me for about the last year and a half in really significant ways. But that doesn't mean that I haven't always had a relationship with nature. And of course we actually can't help but have a relationship with nature as people. I know we like to think nature's over there and then we're people over here, but the truth is we're all we're all nature, right? We actually can't get away from it because we are nature. So I remember a good friend of mine, Chris Corrigan, saying years ago, like we act as if cities aren't nature, but they're built by man and we're of nature. And so even cities, even buildings, all of that could be considered nature. So I want to say that I'm going to talk about nature as we kind of traditionally or typically think about it, the natural world, the woods, the forests, the streams, the mountains, the oceans, the land. But of course, the big lie is that we could somehow ever separate ourselves from it. We are of it. It influences us every day. And those of you who know me in my systems change world know that we use living systems theory. So I've been really, really interested in being in relationship and learning from nature most of my professional life, at least the last 20 years in a very specific way. But I think that me as a person, what is my personal relationship with nature. I've just put more attention on it for about the past 18 months. So, but again, that's not to say most of you, if you listen to this podcast, have heard about the story of my getting bitten by a spider when I was 3 or 4. That is like my first earliest positive memory that a spider kind of came up and crawled onto my foot and bit me. And I've told that story. I don't need to tell it again. Um, but as most little kids, I wasn't afraid of that spider, right? Many little kids, you remember when you're little, like you play with worms, snakes are awesome. The spider came over and there was no part of me that felt concerned about that particularly. And so, I would come to see that later all the way in my 40s, I would come to see that later as an initiation into goddess and really understand that I had been called and claimed even at that early age. But when I was younger, it was like, "Oh, yeah, a black hairy spider just came and bit me," and that seems important. Like I said, my first earliest positive memory was actually of the spider coming and biting me. Um, and so, maybe you have a memory of that from when you were young, like the way you used to go fishing um, or, you know, let flies crawl over your fingers or look at caterpillars or most of us did that subject in elementary school where we got caterpillars and put them in a jar and waited for them to go into their cocoon and most of us have some experience with animal or plant life in our early life that just seemed really normal and we didn't question it and it was just part of it. Most of us played outside a lot of as a kids. I know I'm a Gen Xer. I am of that generation that like the parents were like, "Get outside, just go." And so most of my summers were mostly outside. So and also, um, my mother was raised on a farm, and so, in my early life when my grandparents, her parents still had that farm, I would spend a lot of time on that farm playing, on the hay bales, playing in the corn crib, going down to the timber, fishing in the ponds. That was a big part of, my childhood was this kind of rural life. I grew up rurally, um, and my grandparents' farm was a big part of that early life. I remember one of my favorite activities was to jump on the hay bales, and they would have them all in a row down the field, and we would climb up on them. They were probably, I mean, I don't know, 5 or 6 foot tall. The big round ones, and then we would jump from hay bale. We just like run down the line and jump from bale to bale. And I remember um, jumping and like sometimes you wouldn't quite make it or you would kind of fall and you'd have to grab the twine on the hay bale. And I remember there were lots of spiders in there. And so if you fell, like sometimes you were like face down on a spider or you would see a spider really close. And I remember their black and yellow markings and just thinking how excellent they were and how cool they were. And so, um, but that, you know, I mean, I think that happened until I was about 12 or so. Yeah, I mean, I think we still went back to the farm till I was like 15 or 16, but like that kind of outdoors playing um in 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 nature. until at least till I was about 12 or so. But then I started to kind of like do the thing that teenagers do, which is like no dirt and allergies and I did have seasonal allergies and I just kind of made a life indoors. I don't know if many of you can really resonate with that. Like it just kind of like the outdoors kind of slowly, kind of like slowly went away and I did more things indoors. I was a gymnast, so, like, that's indoors. That was most of my waking life. So I was at school or in gymnastics, studying, and of course, I would go out and swim in the pool and things like that, but, uh, nature as a my playmate, I think, really decreased. Um, yeah, through my, you know, up into my early 20s. I met my ex-husband, and unfortunately, he was a hiker, and so he brought that into my life. I'd never, like, hiked for fun until my 20s, and so I did that, although we weren't really super outdoorsy people, but at least that was, like, kinda part of what we did, and, when my 2nd child was born, I started trail running. And that was, kind of really opened up my eyes to how good running could be when you were in nature, how transcendent you could have these transcendent experiences, like running on a path. You know, I would see, I would see all sorts of birds, squirrels, chipmunks, rabbits, deer, all of that was great. Snakes, did not feel so thrilled about, but I saw them pretty often. But trail running came into my life, and it became important for me to run on trails and not just in the city. And so nature started slowly kind of coming back into my life, right? I would hike some and then I would run some, but I would say it was a pretty one way relationship. Um, I would say that it was kind of like the backdrop to what I was doing. Like I could experience it, I could like it, I could look at the sunset, but I wasn't really in true relationship. I was just kind of appreciating where I was. And you all may have heard me talk about my favorite place to run here in town. I go to the hike. I go hike or run there several times a week. And so I have a place that I go, like the woods that I go to. And I do that several times a week. And so things started to evolve. I started to get more appreciation, but it was still kind of a backdrop. And I can't say that anything like I just feel like kid, I was in it, started to move out of it, late 20s, probably got into it in early 30s, really started to get into it more. And that was kind of my relationship through my mid 40s. And then I started and there was no event. And so if those some of you who are thinking about, how you deepen your relationship with nature, I think it can just be a decision. It doesn't have to be like an event or something dramatic. Some of you are probably like, "Oh my gosh, I've had this relationship my whole life, not a big deal." I did not. And, I kind of had my mom's family, who was like the farming family, who didn't necessarily go out in nature for fun as much as just like that was the lifestyle. And I had my dad's family, who I don't know that I ever saw them do much outside of like family picnics outside. So I think in about my mid 40s, I started to think about more of a reciprocal relationship with nature. What was I giving to this place that was such a beautiful backdrop to me that had given me so much through my running? I knew I loved running on the trails way more than in this on the city streets. So what could I give back? How could I move into some kind of reciprocity um, with nature so that it wasn't just a backdrop. And so I started doing things like singing songs or saying thank you, laying down tobacco when I would go to the park. Like at least once a month, I would lay down some tobacco. I would say a prayer. I would give gratitude. Um, silly things like if I saw something on the path, I would pick it up. I wasn't waiting for someone else to take care of it. I would help people on the trail if they were lost. I just kind of moved from, oh, here I am doing my thing to how do I actually move more into relationship. And that felt really rewarding and right. And I started working with a medicine woman who offered something called dietas. And what that was we would ingest a plant, a non psychoactive plant. So a plant like cedar or a plant like rose. And we would actually ingest the plant through teas or, yeah, through teas generally. And we would come into relationship with the plant. So we would learn about the properties of the plant. Um, we would ask the plant, we would sing songs to the plant. We would, develop a relationship with the plant. And that really, for me, I think was a major turning point um, for my own relationship with the natural world. I could understand that the plants had different properties and consciousnesses. I know, yeah, I could just feel that ingesting rose tea feels really different from ingesting tea made from cedar, and that burning cedar um, creates a different circumstance or feeling than spritzing my face with rose oil and I had a teacher who would kind of help me with that. But this idea that a physical compound could enter your body, a natural physical compound could enter your body and you could move into relationship with it was a big turning point. And so all of this sets the stage for me turning 50 last year, and I could just feel something coming. Um, and again, I feel a little sheepish saying it took me until 50 to be like, oh, I really want to explore this relationship with the natural world, and I'm going to be intentional and make it a focus. I feel a little sheepish saying that because so many of you already have that relationship, or you kind of grew up with that relationship naturally, or you've been camping, your parents took you hiking, or I didn't have that. Um, but at 50, I really made a commitment to move more intentionally into relationship, a reciprocal relationship, a relationship where I was actively learning, where I was actively contributing to the well being of the natural world. Um, and so at 50, I made a couple of commitments. One was I knew I wanted to spend some time out on the land. For my 50th birthday, actually, I just spent a day doing whatever I desired. And part of that ended up being at these woods that I'm so connected to. And just letting myself actually be there in a way that I hadn't before. There was no trail to do. There was no thing to attend or achieve. I just allowed myself to be there, which was a great way to kick off my 50th year. And so I made a commitment to myself to do a few things. I knew I wanted to have unstructured time in nature. Um, and I wasn't even sure exactly what that looked like, but I knew I wanted to make that happen. Um, I wanted to do the moon dance in Costa Rica, which I did in February, which I think I've mentioned here, which is a dance to honor the earth and to honor women's wisdom and women's medicine and to bring it to the earth to help heal and be healed. Um, and then I knew I had this other piece where someone I was working with, the Animas Valley Institute, had asked Gibran and I, my husband and I, had asked us to kind of move into a relationship with them. They're doing great stuff. We're doing great stuff. Um, could we do some great stuff together or even just learn about each other? Maybe would be a much better way to put it. And one of the things that Animas did is they offered to send us to one of um, their kind of foundational programs to have us experience it and be able to kind of um, it's not give feedback, but really kind of give our impressions and into what they're doing and how it might interact with what we're doing. And so I knew at 50 um, that I was going to do some kind of unstructured time in nature. I was going to do the moon dance, which is like a 4-day, 4-night ceremony in Costa Rica around the earth. And then this, what ended up being something called a soul craft intensive from Animas Valley Institute. And so that's what I just got done with, was that soul craft intensive, which was 5 days on the land, being guided and learning more about coming into deep relationship with the natural world. And so that's kind of where I am now. This is Sunday. I just got done with that on Wednesday. And so I really thought I wanted to bring that here and talk a little bit about it and talk about what I think I'm learning in this last year. So I just turned, I just passed my 51st birthday. It's been like just one year since I've made that deep commitment. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll just share a little bit about what I've learned and what I'm thinking about. And then I really do want to share a lesson that's kind of doing my head in a little bit. Um, so I want to share a couple of principles that I I have found. Now, I want to be really, really clear. Some of these principles have been said to me either at the moon dance or with the unstructured time I had, the wilderness wander I did, or the animus program, but I'm not speaking for those groups. These are just kind of things that have stayed with me as like principles. If you're thinking about moving more intentionally into a relationship with the natural world, I think that there are some principles that I could glean, things I heard and things that were important to me that I wanted to share with you. So the first principle, um, take with this what you will. The first principle is around preparation. Like I prepared for all of the things I did and prepared in a way that is not necessarily typical for me. I tend to be kind of I trust myself, I can get it done, I'll figure it out kind of person. I don't necessarily always do a lot of preparation, especially because, all of my work is with people. And so, you prepare, but then people show up and you do what's needed. So, but I did a lot of preparation for each of these pieces. I talked with folks who knew more than me about it. Like, so if I was going to camp in Costa Rica for, I think we were there 8 days camping, then I talked with someone who could help me figure out how to do that. I didn't um, just think, oh, I'll be fine. I go to a tent, it'll be fine. That is very much outside of my comfort zone. I didn't know what kind of tent to buy. I didn't know what kind of sleeping bag. I didn't know what kind of food to bring. Do you bring food? Like, what does it look like? How are you keeping yourself clean? Like all of these things. And so, um, part of what I would say is I prepared for each of these trips, like, and I'm talking about lists and like not only checklists, but like itineraries for myself so that I could feel prepared going in. And it wasn't that nothing surprising happened. It was that I was prepared enough that when I kind of crossed the threshold into whatever experience I was going to be into, I could just let go. Because I knew that I'd prepared and done what I could. I thought through my clothes. I thought through my food. I thought through medicine. I thought through customs, for example, when I traveled out of the country. Um, I really I think the people who were supporting me in these trips were probably a little surprised because I would call and be like, "What about this? How about this? Okay, I need you to talk to me one more time about, like bug spray and what, But for me, I needed to really prepare so I could really let go. And I did, and I was able to. So it's one of those things that for me, preparation allowed a fuller experience. And so if that fits for you, that'd be one of the principles, prepare so that you can let go. Because I really did feel like I was able to really let go during all of these experiences and just be with what the experience wanted to be because I wasn't worried about having the right hat. I knew that I had a sun hat. I knew that I had a, kind of toboggan hat. Um, So prepare. The second principle, if you're not so into preparation, and that's okay, you don't have to be. There's lots of different ways to be successful here. But the second principle, if you're moving into some time with nature, is to see everything as meaningful, right? To believe that when you step out the door, when you step into the woods, or when you put your feet in a creek, that what happens from there is meaningful and is purposeful and has something for you. And so it's kind of like no coincidences, right? Everything has meaning. So the way the light hits the tree, or the way the woodpecker stops and stops pecking when you start speaking. And I actually had this experience with my very first wander. Part of what I did, and I'll talk about this later, was I started telling my story. I went to a place in the woods and I sat down and I told an important part of my story that's very hard for me to share, that I don't share with many people. It was part of my offering. And so I started to tell my story and it was hard. It was hard. Partially I felt kind of silly. Here I am in the woods talking out loud. Who do I think is listening? Part of it's because it's a hard story to tell. It was very unfamiliar behavior to sit on a rock and tell a story with no one around. That was strange. And so I would start and I would stop and I would start and I would stop. And about my third time stopping, a woodpecker actually came and I stopped talking and it pecked. And I was like, okay. And so I started talking again. And then when I stopped talking again, it pecked again. And then I'd start talking, right? And we had a little bit of a back and forth, right? It was almost like the woodpecker was like, "Yeah, keep talking, keep talking. I'm here, I'm listening, keep talking." And so I could have absolutely said, "Oh, interestingly enough, a woodpecker came and started pecking at that moment I was telling my story." But it was actually meaningful. And so if the first is like prepare so you can let go, the second principle is know that everything is meaningful, right? It's not you're not um it's not a coincidence. It's not, what would I say? You're not imagining it, right? Or if you are, just let yourself imagine it. That's the other thing. I think we had Katie Milani on several weeks ago, and she's like, I don't care if I'm making it up. I'm like, yeah. So, like, don't care if you're making it up. Suspend some of your disbelief and it will be amazing, right? Because once you open to some of those things happening, that they happen. And that woodpecker kind of came and listened to my story until I got into the flow of talking. Then he just pecked behind me a little bit and then he went on. And so this goes to the second principle. So if the first is prepare so you can let go, the second is everything is meaningful, the third is there is a conversation to be had. And so if you are seeking relationship with the natural world, know that there is a conversation to be had. There is a back and a forth. There is a call and response that you can step into that beings other than human beings want to be in conversation with you. And it may absolutely take some practice before you actually find yourself in conversation. But there is a conversation to be had, a conversation that wants to be had. The first time I did this, which I mean, I think I considered it a failure. As someone told me before I did my first unstructured time in the wilderness, the guide, her name was Rebecca, said to me to practice a little bit, to go out in nature, introduce myself, say hello, do it out loud. So you know, I'm preparing because that's what I do. So I go out to this park in Boston and I happen to I'm in this little kind of tucked away place and I see and there the I look down and next to the path was like this little puddle of water-ish, deeper than a puddle. Um, and there were 3 gigantic frogs in that puddle. And I was like, "Well, I love frogs. I guess this is where I'll start having my conversation." So I sat down and I talked to the frogs. And I can tell you I felt ridiculous. Sure did. I was like, "Yep, here I am introducing myself to 3 frogs, 3 frogs." I will tell you, if they spoke back, I have no idea. I didn't hear anything back. They gave me nothing back. But they did sit there for 20 minutes while I talked with them. And I just chose to believe we were in some conversation. There was something meaningful from them not hopping away. They had plenty of places to hop. There were reeds all around. So I think they could have gotten away. But just know, and it feels so strange, but there really is a conversation to be had, a back and a forth. And it might take some practice, but you can actually begin to move into conversation with a frog, with a tree, with a stream, with a rock, with an animal. Um, there is a conversation to be had. The fourth principle is offer something. Don't just take. And so when I did my my unstructured time, part of what we offered was fasting. So I went out for a full day, no food, right? So there was a little bit of an offer, an observance, a way of giving to. I also went out completely without company, so no conversation. Those of you who know me know that that wasn't much of an offer for me because I love being alone and I love my own company. So I'm like, well, that's not much of an offer, but I'll make it. But as I was um, on the path, I really took seriously that I needed to offer something, that nature wasn't just hanging out to be in conversation with me, just wasn't hanging out to be meaningful, wasn't hanging out to be my oracle, that I needed to offer something, which is actually how I found myself sharing my story. That rock I sat on that I talked about, the woodpecker, I decided what would be hardest for me was to share some of the hardest parts of my story. Um, and so I knew as soon as it occurred to me, as soon as the story started to play in my mind, I'm like, oh, that's what I'm going to offer. This is a bit of a sacrifice for me. I don't do it very often. And so offer something, don't just take. You might offer a song, you might offer a poem, you might offer a story, you might offer to listen to what uh, whatever being you're around has to say, but offer something. Um, lay down some tobacco, but if there's a conversation to be had, it's really helped by an offering to make. And so prepare so you can let go. Know that everything is meaningful. Understand that there's a conversation to be had, and do some offering. And that offering might look different for different people. Um, but know that if it's made kind of with a true heart and spirit, you'll be received. Two more principles here. One is that, as much as you can, um, know that everything is meaningful and understand that there's a conversation to be had and you give an offer, that is all some things that you have some say in, or that would be maybe the way to say it. But the other thing is, we are as human beings part of something bigger. And so allowing yourself to, how would I say it? We are part of something bigger. And so allowing yourself to understand is not the right word because I'm about to use mystery, to step in to mystery, to acknowledge, honor, respect mystery. There's something larger at play. And so, for me, a really helpful way of thinking about that something larger at play is the divine feminine. But we can think of nature as mystery. We can think of the holy or the sacred, or however way you think about it. As you move into relationship with the natural world, you are stepping into something that is bigger than you and may be actually incomprehensible to you. I still think about the moon dance that I did in February. And I've been describing it to people as, wow, there was a beautiful grandmother who held that ceremony. And I feel like I stepped into her prayer and I was happy to do it. And it was amazing, and I don't understand everything that happened at the dance. I don't understand everything about the prayer. I know it was bigger than me. And so there's some kind of allowing the mystery, finding your right place, like your right size. Like you can do these things, you can step in, and you're stepping into something that's larger than you, that you only will understand a small part of. And so that is part of the freedom of it. You actually get to step into a mystery, a consciousness, an awareness, that an intelligence that is bigger than yours, and give yourself over. And so we do these things intentionally. We prepare, we move into conversation, we offer, we understand that things are meaningful, but ultimately we're moving into relationship with something that is bigger and ineffable. And that is just part of what happens as you move into relationship with nature. Last principle, um, and this is it, is practice. It's really practice. You have to go do it to do it. I told you I was in a conversation with frogs by myself, or it felt that way by myself. It felt really like a failure. I came home and I told Jabron, I'm like, well, I tried it, but I don't think those frogs were having anything to do with me. But so you have to practice. And then last week, I'm like, oh, the stream spoke to me, right? This is, the difference in 6 months. There are practices for sure, but really it's about commitment to an ongoing relationship. And that will absolutely take you out of your comfort zone. There's no way to step into a different kind of relationship, into the mystery in a way that will keep you comfortable the whole time. It's impossible. It's impossible. And so if you're imagining that I want to go out in nature and this is the experience I want to have, that's probably not going to happen. You probably need to go out into nature and allow yourself to surrender a little bit to mystery and to know that you'll be worked. You really will be worked some in that place, which is part of the delight in it. It's part of the uncertainty of it. And part of the mystery of it is I'm still, I had this experience last week that I'm sure I'll be integrating for a long time. But friends, I still am integrating the moon dance. I'm still learning lessons from the wander I did last November. I This is an ongoing practice. And I probably would do this podcast very differently in a year, but I'm just kind of sharing where I am now. All right. So those are the practices. I'm just going to say them one more time. Prepare so you can let go. Know that everything is meaningful. Understand that there's a conversation to be had. Offer something. Don't just take. Surrender to the mystery of it. Understand that you are part of something bigger, and then practice. So hopefully those will be like a set of principles that will, as you all move into deeper relationship. I think those are good principles, even if you have had a lifelong relationship with the natural world. Hopefully those principles will give you something. But finally, I want to finish up today by talking about a lesson that was given to me last week, because it is kind of doing my head in a little bit, I have to tell you. And so I'm kind of sharing it here. And I'm sure that I'll kind of keep sharing kind of where this lesson unfolds. But last week was cold. And those of you who know me IRL know that I really, really don't like cold. I struggle with cold a lot. My happy place is sweating. Like, I know I'm warm enough if I'm sweating, and that makes me delighted. I have not had a hot flash in this menopause period. I have actually had cold flashes because that's what hell is to me, being cold. And so last week was cold. It was cold and it was wet. And that is just about my kryptonite. Truly, truly. It's really hard for me. So, but this was a theme in this recent immersion I did last week. The cold for me was unrelenting. It was just a theme, and it became really obvious that I had to work out something. So this goes back to that principle, everything is meaningful. I could have thought, and I guess I did really as we went into the week, I thought, oh, what terrible luck. It's going to be cold. It's going to be rainy. Now, obviously, I had a hat to keep off the rain. I had a poncho. I had an emergency blanket. I had, a rain jacket. I was prepared, but I kind of thought it was just bad luck. But it became obvious through the week that the cold was going to be a theme for me in the week and a place of great resistance for me. That cold was meaningful. It wasn't bad luck. It was there to show me something, to teach me something, to make me give something, to ask me to surrender. Um, and I was pretty resistant, right? I was really, really resistant. Like, I think I woke up um 10 or 15 times the first night, just pretty pissed off because it was cold and I was cold. And why did I do this? So there was the weather, cold and rainy. That was part of the cold. Also, first night we did this guided imagery. Um, and it asked you to go to a place in nature that you love. And my mind took me to a cold, windy, snow-swept mountain. I was like, nuh-uh. I tried to disagree with my mind. It's like, no, that's not where I want to go. But that's where it had me. Then the next day when we were out on the land, as we were kind of moving into relationship with the land, a stream on the land was like, yep, come put your feet in me. It was so cold that as soon as I put my feet in, they cramped. It was that kind of cold. It was like, it felt Arctic cold. And so I'm like, okay, put my feet in the stream, come back, do another guided imagery. I'm back in an ice cave. And here's where I just like started like, what is happening? I hate the cold. And yet these guided imageries, the stream, the weather, it's all cold and wet. Um, and I'm really at my resistance here. And I felt like I was resistant at a cellular level, right? It didn't feel like my brain was just mad about the cold. It felt like my body was contracting against feeling this feeling that it didn't want to feel. So I brought it to, we had little seed pods. I brought it to my group and I was like, here's the thing. This cold must be here to teach me something. I feel really resistant to whatever lesson it is. But I do believe that that it must be part of this experience in a significant way for me. So, two things started to happen. One is I realized it was there for me. Three things. One is I realized it was there for me to work with. So I may as well turn towards it rather than resist it. That was, even if I didn't like it, it was going to be part of the lesson. So I just needed to like turn face forward into the cold. The second is that Gibran reminded me in some cosmologies that the goddess is cool. So I've always been more resonant with like the fiery faces of goddess Kali, or or actually fire and warmth, right? That she kind of burns away that which isn't needed, right? So I felt pretty comfortable with kind of the fiery, fierce face of goddess. And I hadn't really developed much relationship with the cold, the cooler, the aloof, the goddess that burns through ice, right? I realized I had very little relationship with that face of the goddess. And so, okay, like it's like one thing I can say about myself is I am devoted to her and I'm devoted to learning more about her. And so if she wanted to show me her cold face, then that's actually where I needed to go. I needed to be burning with cold and not heat. Um, And then the third thing was one of the guides, very beautifully, because I had been going to the stream where the water was so cold and the stream kind of kept calling me back, even though I tend to love the forest, the stream could call me back. One of the guides said, ask the stream why you have to be cold, or why cold. I think she said, why cold at this moment. And so I committed to doing that. So one is like, gonna face it. Second was goddess has another face and it's time for me to see it. Third was like, ask nature what's the lesson here? Why cold? So, um, you know, at some point, if we know each other in person, I'll share the whole story and, over dinner or something. But for those of you on the podcast, what I would say is I kept going to the stream. I eventually fully immersed myself in the stream, like super cold, like so cold. I was singing as I sunk down into the stream and it knocked the air from my lungs and I couldn't sing anymore. But by the last day, I ended up walking down the stream, um, in like walking inside the stream, down the stream with my feet bare. And I didn't want to leave. I had kind of learned about the cold. I'd learned to be with the cold. I'd learned some of the lessons from the stream. And I felt like, oh, okay, I want to be with this cold. I want to not turn away from it. And as I was about to leave the stream for the last time, like I think one of the stream's kind of final lessons to me as I was walking down, was it was like the stream was like, listen to your no's, but do not get attached to them. And so I had been such a no to the cold, right? Which is real. I don't want to be contracted. I don't want to be hard. And so it's important to listen to like what my body and what my psyche was telling me. Like she's affirming that, but then saying, but do not get attached to them because look at what's on the other side. What's on the other side was like a deep love for the stream and like wanting to be in her cold waters in a way that I've never experienced cold in my life. And I say that was like this I mean, there were many lessons from the stream, but like that was one of the big ones. Listen to your nose, but do not get attached. And why that is so radical for me is because for myself and in my coaching, often, we do like a yes, no exercise. What is your body telling you? Is your body saying yes to this? Or is your body saying no to this? And if their body's a no, then you got to go with that no, right? Often even the hardest no's, once you say no, your body relaxes. And so I kept thinking that because I wasn't relaxed, because I was cold, right? Because I felt tense, that no to the water, to the cold was it wasn't that it wasn't important, but it was like where I needed to stay. I needed to stay in that no. And what the stream taught me is like I needed to honor that no, but not be so attached. Like, like I say to people, I hate the cold, I hate winter. Like, I don't need to be attached to that story. I can let my body say yes or no. I don't ever need to override my body, but I need to be open to a shifting perspective. And so this has been really important for me just in the last 5 days. Like, what am I saying no to out of habit, out of instinct, but not instinct based on something deep, but like instinct because, like I'm a no to that. And so that's really the question. The lesson for me that's up for me right now is what have I said no to? Not in an effort to overwhelm that no, not in an effort to change my mind, honoring that no, but also knowing I can hold it lightly, that things might change. So for example, um, I was I was pretty much a no. It sounds silly. This is a small example. I was pretty much a no to a solo podcast. I don't tend to like to listen to solo podcasts. I like the interaction with people. Um, I listen to a few solo podcasts, but generally no. I was pretty much no. But maybe solo podcasting will become I think it will become a regular part of this. Like I was a no, and now I'm just not too attached to that no. And so that's a question I'm taking with me. Where has my no been right and real and true and needs to be honored? And where have I just been overly attached to it? And both can be true. And so I'm certainly not those of you who work with me in coaching. I'm not saying we are going to ignore our body's wisdom at all. Or ignore our nose at all. I think sometimes actually getting in touch with your nose is like the first part to really honor those nose and just be like, nope, and nothing's going to move me. But I think what I'm learning now is like I can trust my nose enough that I don't have to grab them. I can trust them and I can look at them and I can hold them. And then I can see if I still need to be attached to them or if they're still the right no for me. And so that's been a really radical lesson. Listen to your nose. Do not get too attached to them. So that's the lesson I'm sharing with you all. I'd be curious where you might have had that experience before. For me, of course, it had to happen on a physical level. I'm a really physical person. And so this body cold thing was a big deal. So I'd love to hear from folks if there are places where you have felt attached to your nose and maybe have moved on to something different or in a healthy way, not because you overrode yourself or did not listen to your wisdom. Um, but we're changing, growing, shifting, transforming beings. And so, where have you learned that perhaps you were overly attached to a no? I'd love to know. You can drop us an email, hello at Rooted in Light. Um, that would be great. You can just like contact us through the website. You know what I'm thinking? We probably just, I think it's actually, oops, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. I think it's hello at tuesdayrivera.com, not Rooted in Light, hello at tuesdayrivera.com. You can leave anything there and we'll get it. And I would love to hear from folks like where has your no softened or shifted as you have grown and become different yourself? And so that's a little bit, I just wanted to share. That's a little bit about my ongoing, evolving relationship with nature. I'm sure it's going to continue to evolve. I've got some plans still coming up. I'll do the moon dance next year. So it's not going away. I'll continue to share this. But so I'm just going to do the principles one more time. Maybe you don't need them. Maybe you do. But principles, prepare so you can let go. Um, Everything is meaningful. Know that everything is meaningful. Understand that you're in a conversation. Make an offering. Don't just take. Step into the mystery or surrender to mystery. You're part of something bigger and take some practice. Those are the principles. The lesson is listen to your no, but don't get too attached. Thank you so much for joining me today. Last thing, I like to leave people with a practice. And so, practice is really simple if you're interested in doing this. I've now been with several people who know a lot about guiding in nature. And often, what they're suggesting as a first step is that you go out into nature and find something that captures your attention, a tree, a rock, a root, an animal. Go out into nature, go to something that captures your attention, and simply introduce yourself. But that has to be out loud. Introduce yourself out loud. Say your name, say what you're seeking or what you're hoping, maybe make an offering. Um, but keep talking. Do it for some time. And I would even say maybe keep talking until you hear something back. Although, from my first frog experience, I never heard anything back. So I had to wind it down on my own. But go out into nature, introduce yourself out loud, use your words, and see if you get something back. And keep trying, keep practicing. So good to be with you. Thank you so much. If you've liked this, share it with people. If you're want to give me feedback, hello@tuesdayrivera.com. I would love to hear from you and know kind of what kind of podcasts you're into. Solo, interviews, conversations, all of it. I'd love to get your feedback. Thanks so much.